Welcome back to another episode of the Goal Line Stand podcast. I am your host, Jackson Caldwell, here with Coby Reed. Coby, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, brother. I had to take a little week off last week traveling with the fam. Your boy got engaged over the last week. So excited about that. Um, had an amazing week of college football. Had a lot of upsets this week that we didn't think would happen. But other than that, everything's good. How you been?
Doing good, man. The bye week hit at the perfect time. Just I had to digest whatever the heck that Miami Georgia Tech
Whatever
game was.
happened, yeah.
I had to. It was a shame you were traveling last week and then we're sick because like that we needed like a 2 hour deep dive into that game. But yeah, it was a good week off. Back at it this week. Boston College coming to the ATL this week, so that's a must win for those Yellow Jackets if they want to get to a bowl game. Like you got to get that one. So we'll see what they can do. But yeah, been good. Was a great week of college football. Like had some great games. Possibly the game of the year, which we'll talk about. I it was good. You know, the season's rolling right along. We got think about 2 weeks from tonight. We're going to be talking about the first playoff rankings being released. 2 more weeks and the first playoff rankings being released.
Already waiting to see the commercials all over the place.
It's all about the playoff.
Who's in?
I guess let's just dive right into it. I know you were a little under the weather this weekend, but there was a football game in Seattle, Washington that was phenomenal. From just the quarterback play, both quarterbacks just were so good. I know Marvin Harrison Jr. rightfully is going to be the first receiver taken in April. Rome Odunze should be the second at this point. He 8 catches, 128 yards, 2 touchdowns. Like he showed up and showed why he should be a first-round wide receiver in this game. Bo Nix played well. Oregon ran the ball well. We had some questionable fourth down decisions from Dan Lanning. Overall, it looked like Washington was kind of dead in the water after they had a 4th and goal snuffed out by Oregon. But their defense held, got to stop, and then like Michael Penix and this Washington Huskies offense just did their thing, and now they are the clear-cut front runner in the Pac-12, especially given how USC looked, and now Oregon has a loss too. So take it any direction you want to go, but I came away from this game thinking both teams are playoff caliber teams, even though Oregon did lose.
The biggest takeaway, I went back and rewatched the game. Phenomenal game. Both of these teams are easily top 10, perhaps even top 5 or 6 in the country. I mean, they played really well. We had a couple questions earlier in the season about how good is Oregon really, and I think even though they lost, I still think they are one of the premier teams in the country right now. The biggest thing I took away from it, though, the transfer portal is proving week in and week out that it might be one of the best things to happen for college football.
100%.
3 years ago, would you have thought Bo Nix would ever perform the way he has this year?
No. I mean, this quarterback matchup was just a masterclass of what the transfer portal can do if you take the right opportunity.
Yes, and I hate it because as soon as a kid transfers, it's, the kid took the easy way out. Mm-hmm. He wasn't getting playing time, NIL, blah, 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 blah. Bo Nix has upped his draft stock in a matter of 2 years more than he ever could have at Oregon or at Auburn. And then same with Michael Penix. I mean, me and you, we both had our questions about Michael Penix before he got to Washington. And sure enough, here he is having 2 of the best quarterback seasons we've seen back to back. And Michael Penix gets a big win on against Oregon. And to be honest with you, I don't think it's not like there's just one thing that Oregon was lacking that made them lose the game. It's not because they lost a battle in the trenches. It's not because they had bad quarterback play or had wide receiver drops or anything like that. It was just 2 really good teams that went head to head, and a flip of a ball here and there, a team ends up winning by 3 points. I think it was just a great game all the way around. You got to see Troy Franklin, wide receiver, Oregon, ball out. You got to see the stable of wide receivers we've been bragging about at Washington ball out. I think it was just a great game. And to be honest with you, if you would have told me the best game in the country would have come out of the Pac-12 in our preview, I would not have believed you.
No, we did like the Pac-12 in some of the offenses this year, but also if anybody doesn't like the transfer portal, sit here with a straight face and tell me you would have just rather Michael Penix stayed at Indiana just to finish out his career because it's the right thing to do instead of watching this great team unfold right before our eyes. And I think maybe the scary thing is Jalen McMillan was banged up and didn't play.
Yes,
like they they still got some weapons to throw out there. And look, if these two teams want to play again for a spot in the playoff, by all means, you go ahead and meet up in Vegas, and we'll do it again because I do think these are the two best teams in that conference right now.
Yeah.
We'll get to the rest of it a little bit later, but that was one of my takeaways as well. I've had questions about Oregon's receivers, but I do think Troy Franklin's a legitimate wide receiver.
Yes.
That was one of my main questions for them going into the year was I thought their receiving core was kind of average, and I thought he was good, but not like good enough to elevate a passing attack. And like that's Bo Nix's go-to guy. Like he can do it. They run the ball very well.
Yep.
Their defensive line, I think they played well going into the game. I thought they were a little off because I think that's the first good offensive line they've played all year. So if I have a slight concern about Oregon is like when they play good offensive lines, like are they still going to be able to get pressure? But some of the teams, like we saw USC's offensive line is not very good. So I don't think that's going to be a problem. But when they face like Oregon State, like that could be a problem. So that's about the only question I'd have. And now I guess the thing is, and we'll get to it maybe a little bit more in our Pac-12 discussion is now, can these teams avoid the landmines in front of them? Like Washington has Arizona State and Stanford up next. Like they'll be fine the next couple of weeks before they go to USC, and Oregon as well. Like that, they'll both be challenged in November. Now it's just Oregon has to win out to get to the playoff, and Washington they can still avoid a slip up like that. That's
the thing with Oregon that scares me is that they play really solid teams the rest of the way. I mean, you have Washington State, you have Utah. You still got to play USC, and I mean, we'll get to USC in a second, but they still have Caleb Williams. They still have that offense that can put up points. And then they got to play Oregon State, and Oregon State seems to be improving week in and week out. So if Oregon can hold it out, and I think they definitely have the strength of schedule resume, if they can be a one-loss team and make the playoffs, I don't know. I think they're a top 3 team in the country when it's all said and done.
Yep. Very good team all around. I guess we need to hit on it for this game. Like I know a lot of the discussion, I think some of it's a little overblown about some of the Dan Lanning fourth down decisions. I told you pre-show, I think the only one I had a problem with was the one at the end of the first half when he could have taken the 3 points because generally when I'm in fourth down decisions, if you go for it deep in opponent's territory, you can set them up with bad field position if they have to take over. That wasn't the case here. Like you were getting the ball coming out of the half and you could have added points on the board. Like there's no time left. And the ones at the end of the game I got because look, it's what was it? 4th and 2, 4th and 3. Yeah. You end the game like that. Like, or I think if you'd have punted, like Washington can score from anywhere on the field. It's not like maybe 25 or 30 extra yards pinning them a little further back, I think was going to help all that much. Like they drove down there in like no time at all after they got the ball back. So I don't really – I think some of it's a little overblown. Obviously, when you make decisions like that and they backfire, they're going to be headlines. But I think,
I mean, hindsight's always 20/20, and you got to trust that Dan Lanning. He's proven this year that he is a very capable head coach. He knew something that we didn't know, to be honest with you. If he's willing to call that and he's willing to put the game on the line – that just shows he trusts his guys to try to go out there and win a game. Mm-hmm. The only problem was he was playing a very, very good Washington team. If that was anybody else, I think he wins that. And those going for it on fourth down, I think that wins them the game.
Well, that was the point I was going to make because Dan Lanning does this all the time. Like he is one of the most I know people there's a stigma about defensive coordinators as head coaches being more conservative, and there certainly are those types. Dan Lanning is as aggressive as just about any coach in the country, and he is successful more often than not.
Yeah.
The thing is, in the games he's lost at Oregon, he lost to Washington last year on a similar decision. Like they had a 4th and short last year, and they didn't get it. And then he had a couple of bad decisions against Oregon State last year. And those losses, it's magnified. But he does it like every game. Like he's gonna be aggressive as long as it's not like 4th and 13 in his own 10-yard line. Like he's gonna go for it more often than not, just because he believes in his team to be able to get stops, and he just thinks he's better than you. And Oregon is better than most teams, so I don't have a problem with it.
Yep.
All right, from the game of the week to the blunder of the week, I guess. We picked USC at the beginning of the season, but we've both been warning. There's some signs here that this is fraudulent a little bit.
Yeah.
If you'd have told me that Notre Dame would have won 48-20, I might have believed you. If you'd have told me they won it in the fashion that they did, I wouldn't have believed you. USC's defense had nothing to do with this loss, and I'm not here trying to defend it or say it's good, but just they weren't in a position where they had any pressure on them because Caleb Williams just had like the worst performance of his career by a large margin. Like even in his worst games, like last year, the worst game I saw him play was against Utah in the Pac-12 title, but he was also hurt, so I didn't really know what to make of it. He was just flat out bad in this game. Like he looked like he was just trying to force everything, and he felt like he had to do it all himself because the throws he was making they were really bad. Notre Dame had those 3 interceptions. I'll set them up at the 20-yard line or further. Easy scores. They had a kick return. They had a scoop and score. That's 35 points.
Yep.
Their offense didn't have to drive the ball. Like Sam Hartman basically got a night off. Like he didn't have to do anything. And it's unfortunate for USC. Now, I guess if you're really digging deep for a silver lining, if you're a USC fan, then you're saying it's not a Pac-12 loss. We still got everything in front of us. If we win out, we're in the playoff. Fine. They're not winning out. That's the main thing I took away from this. I've been hinting. I don't think USC is a serious football team.
Yeah.
Offensively, they just look for a Lincoln Riley coached offense with Caleb Williams. They look so ordinary. Like their offensive line just got absolutely obliterated that game, and like their skill guys weren't making plays. Yeah. I don't know. They just look out of sync. Their defense is still not very good, even though they weren't the main reason they lost. They gave up special teams. They turned the ball over. Like there's not a single thing USC did right in this football game.
No, I mean, they had 5 turnovers. I mean, you get stopped on 3 and outs. I don't know how many times you have to punt the ball. I don't know how many times. I mean, it was – if you're going to beat a team like USC, that's how you have to do it. You have to force those turnovers and take the ball out of their hands. I mean, Caleb Williams had 5 interceptions last year. He's already got 4 now, and he had 3 in one game. Yeah. Nobody could have predicted that coming. I mean, I still think he is an elite football player. I think he's an elite quarterback. But you got to question, what is Lincoln Riley doing? I mean, this USC team is not better than some of his best teams at Oklahoma, but the issues he has on these USC teams is the same issues he had with those teams at Oklahoma. It's the same Lincoln Riley. You still have high caliber players all over that offense, and the defense is a huge liability. Well, whenever your quarterback, you don't have a first overall pick at quarterback playing like that, you can't win games if you're USC. You can't expect your defense to bail you out, and especially with the field positioning they were giving Notre Dame. There's no way you can win in that fashion. And with Notre Dame, I give them all the props in the world. I love Marcus Freeman. I think Marcus Freeman is one of the better things to happen to college football. I think he's going to be a premier coach over these next couple of years. But with that being said, the same issues, like you said, we had with USC all year long, and we started to notice it during Colorado. We definitely noticed it against Arizona, and now it all came to fruition whenever you play a team like Notre Dame. They can't win a national championship like that.
No. Take Caleb Williams off this team, they're 7-5. They might be 7-5 with him, but if you take Caleb Williams off this team, like where is USC elite at? I guess the skill, like their receivers are pretty good, but like their offensive line, it's worse than it was last year. Yeah. Their defense is not that much, like it's a little better than it was last year, but like that's not a high bar to clear. That's like saying I was averaging 23 a game. Like, okay, congratulations, but like it's not a huge improvement. I don't know. I'm interested to see how they do, because if they lose another game and are out of playoff contention, I hate being this guy to bring this up, but what does Caleb Williams do? Like, does he's going to be the first pick in the draft.
You got to go to the league at that point.
I'm just saying, like we've seen it. Like that would be my concern, because I don't know. USC seems like a fragile situation right now. Yeah. Just being totally honest. Like,
and just because I'm a Spencer Rattler advocate, that same kind of game that Caleb Williams had, that's the same game Spencer Rattler had against Texas that got him benched, that put Caleb Williams in the spotlight. Like, that was just a bad game by Caleb Williams.
Yeah, and, like, I hate to – like, I know Notre Dame won this football game. You have to give them credit, and I hate making USC the main talking point. But also, like, a lot of teams are going to win that way when Caleb Williams is turning the ball over and setting you up in short field position. So, I mean, Notre Dame has a chance to finish 10-2. They was kind of they needed their bye week at this point because, like, think about it, they played Ohio State, Duke, Louisville, USC all in a row. Like, that's a pretty tough.
And I was just about to say, you know who the real winner is here? Ohio State, because that Notre Dame win makes Ohio State's schedule.
Because I was saying, if USC won this game, and then let's say Clemson and somebody else beat Notre Dame, and they're 7-5, that takes away a huge win for Ohio State. If you're Ohio State, given how Penn State and Michigan don't have any non-conference opponents or anything else, like, you need that win, like that. Because let's say they get left out of the Big Ten title and are 11-1.
You have that win against a 10-win Notre Dame team,
who we know
on the road
you put top 12 at some point. So, I guess the other big game of the day was those Miami Hurricanes we were talking about. I want to talk about North Carolina, though.
We got to have this conversation.
I think we're looking at a dark horse playoff contender. I know. I feel we're on our second season on this podcast, but I remember last year, even when they were winning, me and you were not sold on them just because their defense was like USC bad. This year, though, look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you North Carolina is Alabama or Penn State. North Carolina has a top 50 defense, which if this offense is going to play this good, you can get to the playoff with it. Like they get pressure on the quarterback. They force turnovers. Cedric Gray is a very good linebacker. Their secondary has improved this year. They're not allowing a ton of explosive plays. Miami got some on them, but some of it was in garbage time. North Carolina is pretty for real. I still think like Miami's defensive line is actually kind of very good. I don't think most people realize that, and they kind of beat North Carolina up on the offensive line. They got like 5 or 6 sacks, I believe. But still, that's my main concern with them moving forward. But until they play Clemson, the only defensive line that's going to scare you the rest of the way is Clemson. And assuming they play Florida State in the ACC title, like Florida State's pretty good too. But Drake May was fantastic. We know how talented he is. Tez Walker changes this offense because you had a good receiving core. Now you have a bona fide number one, and he opens everything else for Nate McCollum, those tight ends. Marion Hampton had nearly 200 yards rushing. This is a good football team.
And we said that in the preview. Like, their defense could not be any worse than it was last year. But imagine they had a top 50, even a top 60 defense. UNC could be a very good team. And sure enough, here they are. They have a top 40 defense. You have Drake May playing lights out. You have a bona fide number one wide receiver now. I think he's better, and you said it before the show. I think he is a true number one receiver opposed to Josh Downs. Josh Downs is still a really good receiver, especially in college. But now you have a true bona fide number one. And then you have a running back 3 yards shy of 200 yards against Miami. Florida State better be on the lookout. That's all I'm going to say.
What a game that would be. Undefeated Carolina, undefeated Florida State for an ACC title and a playoff berth. That'd be interesting. I guess let's talk about the Miami side of this. I kind of left feeling like I was stewing on it for a couple of days. Like, Miami should rightfully be clowned for how they handled that Georgia Tech game. You had the game won. You decide to run the football. Georgia Tech keeps playing, and Georgia Tech deserves all the credit in the world for that win. I still felt like Miami's a pretty good team, that they're still a little ways away from being where they want to be.
Tyler Van Dyke still made a lot of really good plays, and I think that kind of goes under the radar.
Yeah, and he also made some mistakes. Okay, Miami had a chance to tie it up 7-7. They fumble on the 1 yard line. Killer mistake.
Yeah.
He throws an interception on deep in Miami's own end. North Carolina gets the easy score off of it.
Yeah.
They just had so many mistakes in that game. Like, they could have stayed in that game. They were winning the game at halftime. Like, it wasn't like North Carolina. They just hit a different gear in the third quarter. I think they scored 21 unanswered, and that put the game away. Miami was unable to consistently run the ball. I still think, if they finish 8-4 or 9-3, I still think that's a pretty good season for Miami, considering that they were 5-7 in a disaster a year ago.
Yes, and they still have a bunch of young talent on that Miami team. I'm not going to let that go unrecognized, and they're still going to bring talent in. But they have to finish out and handle business the rest of this year. I want to see them have an improved record opposed to what they had last year.
And they're going to be challenged this week against Clemson. Clemson's been Miami's boogeyman for a long time. They've kind of dominated that rivalry. I don't know if it's a rivalry, but they've dominated that series here lately. But in a weird way, I felt much better about Miami after that loss than the Georgia Tech one, just because like you lost to a good team on the road. Like there's no
Yeah,
shame in that, especially like unless you're like Miami doesn't have national title expectations like Georgia, Michigan, or Alabama. Like those teams,
yeah,
like that's agonizing for you. But for Miami, it's just like, okay, we measured ourselves up against one of the better teams in the
yeah,
ACC or the country. We lost. Let's move on.
yeah.
I guess let's get to the Conference of Champions first. We just talked about the biggest game from that weekend, but anything really stand out to you from the ACC? I mean, we had Florida State.
Louisville losing to
Yeah, I
sorry,
guess.
Louisville losing to Pitt. That threw me off, dude. So if y'all don't know, Jackson said it before. I was sick all day Saturday. I fell asleep at 3:30 in the afternoon. I didn't wake up till 3:30 in the morning. And for some reason, the first game I see when I check the scores is Louisville lost to Pitt. Who would have seen this coming? Because we were expecting Pitt to be a gimme game for this team.
Yeah, I guess maybe we should have because Pat Narduzzi's had a past of doing this. Like, remember 2017, Miami came into Pitt, number 2 in the country, undefeated, and lost to Pitt.
Yeah.
They've done it before. I didn't think this Pitt team was going to do it because this Pitt team's been terrible all year.
Yeah.
Louisville they turned the ball over. Like Louisville outgained them by a pretty good margin. Like they had a lot more yards and success than Pitt did, but they just couldn't finish drives and they turned the ball over. Like, it's just disappointing for Louisville because like we've known their schedule is pretty soft and like they got a huge win against Notre Dame, which looks a lot better now because of how they played against USC, but still like Louisville still has a path to get to the ACC title, but it got a lot harder because you don't get a chance to beat North Carolina or any of these top teams and get a win against them and get your spot in there. You got to hope they lose now. So Florida State and Carolina are both in the driver's seat. So yeah, I was pretty stunned by that. Like, and again, maybe we should have seen it coming. Like Louisville's good, but they're not so good that they can take a game on the road for granted. And coming off a big win against Notre Dame, your bye week's just ahead. People are starting to pat you on the back now that you're a really good team.
Yeah,
Narduzzi, he finds a way every year to do something like that. But there's only 3 other games. Like Florida State dominated Syracuse. I'll say this: Syracuse is just beat up. There might not be a more beat up team in the country than Syracuse. They have so many starters out on offense. I just kind of they're trying to piece something together on offense. And it's just kind of sad to watch. Like their schedule softens up. Like they've had to play Clemson, Carolina, and Florida State all in a row. Like that's tough. So I still think they can get 2 more wins, get to a bowl game, but that's a beat up team right now. Virginia Tech beat Wake Forest. Wake Forest, I don't know if they're going to go to a bowl game this year. They've lost 3 in a row for a program that's made like so many in a row and kind of built that thing up. I'd be really disappointing for them to miss one. And then, shout out to Duke. Didn't have Riley Leonard. They were kind of outplayed in some ways by NC State, but the one area they weren't outplayed in, explosive plays. That changed the game. They hit a couple of deep shots, beat NC State with a backup quarterback that went 4 for 12. So they need Riley Leonard though. That's a good team with Riley Leonard.
Whoa! Did you say Duke is a good team?
I said Duke was a good team. I've ate those words. I'm wrong. That was one of the stupider things I've said. Look, that we'd have to go back to count some of the stupid things.
Which one are you more embarrassed about? Your Baylor prediction or your Duke prediction?
Baylor. When I'm wrong on a team and they're terrible, I feel worse about it. When somebody proves me wrong, I honestly feel fine about it. Like if you're going out there and like winning games and prove me wrong and not losing by double digits to Texas State, I feel a lot better about that.
You just gave motivation to Duke like I gave motivation to Malik Neighbors. That's all. Yeah. That's all that is.
You talk about Malik Neighbors, and you were riding high on that horse after that Florida State game, and then lo and behold, he leads the nation in receiving. So
I'll be fair. Malik Neighbors just suffered the wrath and the hatred I have for LSU as a whole. It was not him specifically. I just hate LSU as a whole. That's all.
But yeah, ACC was kind of a light schedule this week. Any other takeaways or big things from that conference this week?
No, like we said, just watch out for UNC, man. If they keep playing how they're playing, their defense keeps playing how they're playing, they're not going to be a dark horse for long. They're going to be a premier contender.
Yep. Listen to us now, believe us later. Let's go to the Big Ten. Here's a question. Me and you have been me and you can never decide on who we think is the best team in the country because we change it from week to week.
Yeah.
I see a lot of the Michigan folks starting to pick up a lot now. I'm sure you've seen it too.
Yeah.
Even though they hadn't played anybody, like they are just annihilating teams. Like, and again, I'm there's a certain part of me that's still skeptical just because of they did this last year and then they got to TCU and then could stop them. So
Yeah.
I do think like I don't know if most people know this, but Michigan has not allowed an opponent to get inside the 10-yard line. Like they have not faced a first and goal or any situation like that. That's kind of insane. Like
And the only
again,
time they've given up double-digit points all year is they gave up 10 points and still won the game by 42, and that was the Minnesota.
Yeah. Do you think would you feel comfortable saying Michigan's the best team in the country? Or are you still just not there yet because of
Yes, because I'm going to stick to my guns. I said before the season started, I said in our preview, Michigan was the team that we had the most amount of questions about going into this year. They had their quarterback coming back, they had their running game coming back. You knew what their defense was going to be, and they have Jim Harbaugh, which is turned out to be a really good coach. If you would have asked me 3 years ago about Jim Harbaugh, I would have said he's gone to the NFL, whatever else. But he's really turned it around, and they've gone to back-to-back playoffs, and now their team is playing like this. Even though the schedule is kind of lacking, they're still beating teams the way they need to be beaten. They are beating the brakes off of everybody. They're holding everybody to minimum points. I can't knock them for that. You got to play who's on the schedule. I mean, it is what it is. I still think we have the most amount of questions about that team over anybody else in the country right now.
I've really taken to the mantra I've heard it's how you play, not who you play so much. And while I still like to see teams play quality competition, like just looking at advanced stats, like Michigan's just like they're
tearing it up right now.
They're again, they're basically just on like a simulate. Like it's on when you're playing NCAA and you're just trying to get through some parts. Like they're just simulating. They play Penn State.
Yeah.
But like they're playing excellent right now. And one thing I know, me and you mentioned in the preseason was okay because he's coming off an ACL tear and some things like it may be a little bit for this Michigan ground game gets going. It's going.
Yeah.
Like
and they haven't even let Blake Corum run loose yet. And just out of running back by committee, they're just still tearing teams apart. And on top of that, JJ McCarthy has worked his way into the Heisman conversation.
I was going to say that's a dark horse for the Heisman right now. We were talking about the Washington game earlier. Michael Penix moved. He's like minus 130 to win the Heisman now at most sports books, which means like he is a pretty clear favorite right now. Yeah. Keep your eye on JJ McCarthy. I think if he goes out and balls against Penn State and Ohio State, he's going to be a finalist at minimum. Like he's playing very good football. Kind of elsewhere in the Big Ten, Ohio State they run through Purdue. That was never a game. Penn State beat UMass.
Iowa won in typical Iowa fashion against Wisconsin. I mean, what's new?
Outgained. Wisconsin has a better success rate. Wisconsin has a higher EPA. Wisconsin has better this, that. It don't matter. Iowa's quarterback is 6'16", 35 yards. They hit an 82-yard touchdown run, and then Iowa's good. They don't want to score any more points. Tanner Mordecai, I think he broke his hand. I think he's out for a little bit, if I'm not mistaken, for Ohio State. Or not for Wisconsin. He'll be out for that Ohio State game, I think, in a couple weeks. So, man, an 11-1 Iowa team, and, like,
I can't stand
it's a possibility. Like, they get Minnesota this weekend.
I can't.
A bye week. Then they play, in no particular order, I kind of forget the order, they play Illinois, Northwestern, Rutgers, Nebraska. They're going to be and they play all those but Nebraska are at home. Nebraska is the only road game they have left.
Yeah.
Hey, we know how tough Iowa is a place to play.
Hey, we got to talk about it. We just got to throw it in there. Shout out to freaking Rutgers, man. Who would have thought this?
Like they're 5-2. They're one, and the thing is, like I just mentioned them in that game, they're the team most likely to beat Iowa. Because like Rutgers' defense is actually very good. Like Rutgers' defense, they can't throw the ball worth anything.
But they can run the ball. I mean, against Iowa defense, you got to be able to run the ball.
Yeah. Rutgers, like, they were down a little bit. And, when the Big Ten's in divisions like this, Rutgers' only chance to really get to a bowl game or win 6 or 7 games is because you're never beating Ohio State, Maryland, or Penn State. Or Michigan, Penn State.
Yeah.
You got to hope Indiana's terrible, which they are. You got to hope Michigan State is down. They are
Which
for
they really are.
a ton of circumstances we're not getting into right now, but they're down. Maryland is okay at best. And then you get it like the Big Ten West is just a bad division. Like
Yeah.
it just even Iowa, the best team in it right now and in the driver's seat, they're not a good team. So
I mean, 7-5 is good for Rutgers. That's
yeah,
a
it's
good season
excellent for
for
Rutgers.
Rutgers.
Like
Yeah.
I know people like me and you remember the Big East days when they had Ray Rice and Kenny Britt, the McCourty
Yeah.
brothers. Like they were top 15. Some of that's who you had to play. Like that team is 6-6 in the Big Ten. Like just being
Yeah.
honest, but like just very good season for them. Big win over Michigan State. We'll see what they do the rest of the year. Maryland had just a letdown. Like they played well against Ohio State. I know they lost, but they played well, and then they come and lay an egg against a bad Illinois team.
Yep.
Any other Big Ten thoughts? I mean, they outside of Iowa, Wisconsin, there was just no really meaningful games. I guess. Well, Rutgers winning that game's meaningful.
I mean, with the Big Ten, I think everybody is just we're looking
We're
forward
waiting.
to the most anticipated matchup, and that is going to be Penn State and Ohio State. Everybody's waiting on it.
We'll see. It's not even the two best teams in the conference. They play later. Penn State, Michigan, they play later this season. So that's the matchup I'm really looking forward to. We'll see if I'm vindicated on Penn State or not. I'm kind of nervous going into this game. I'm not gonna lie, but
how you feel about Penn State is how I feel about Florida State right now.
Yeah, like I know they're very good, but it's all right. Are you playoff? This is the time, James Franklin. I know this is not like a preview show, but there's a lot of pressure on that man this weekend. I'm just gonna say that Ohio State is not hitting on all cylinders on offense.
And a noon kickoff kills me for that game.
Yes.
It kills me.
And that's what we're getting for Michigan too. We're not getting a whiteout, I don't think, for that because it's in Penn State. That's a shame, man. I hate it. Big 12, I don't know what to call this conference. I cannot figure this conference out for anything. It's just you have two elite teams, and then you have I don't know what. Like you have just a bunch of just teams mashed together. I think there's some teams that are not great, but man, I know you were sick over the weekend. West Virginia scores with 12 seconds to go. Looks like they're going to get to 5-1 and beat Houston, and Houston hits a Hail Mary to end the game. That was an absolutely crazy game. I loved every second of it. Man, I hate that Jalen Daniels isn't playing, but Jason Bean has been balling out, and Kansas defense is just still so bad. Kansas and Oklahoma State was one of the best games to watch this past weekend. It was a high-scoring affair. Me and you talked about it pre-show. Like, do we need to apologize to Mike Gundy? Like,
because he does this to us every time. When we think he's not going to do anything, he does something, and then whenever we think he's going to do something, he does nothing.
They might be the third best team in the Big 12. I say that about everybody.
That's shocking.
Well, after South Alabama bullied them, they've beaten Kansas State. They beat Kansas. They were both ranked.
Yeah.
The
thing is, they could very well go 9-3 this year.
It's possible. Like they can beat anybody, and I don't think they can beat Oklahoma. I think they can beat anybody else. But the thing is, we talked about that game. I think it's in Stillwater, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be the last matchup we see between these two for a very long time. Mike Gundy, he played at Oklahoma State. He's coached Oklahoma State a long time. Like, that game means a ton to him. And there's a saying about Bedlam. Oklahoma wins by a little or they win by a lot. Like, Oklahoma State doesn't really win that game a lot. He's going to throw the kitchen sink at that game. I'm just saying. Just if Oklahoma's going to lose a game, that's where it is. But also, like, I know they're just 3-3, but after the way their year started, especially with some of the offseason gambling scandals they've had, Iowa State's bounced back pretty well. Like, Cincinnati, Emory Jones, go check out our comments from in group text from 3 years ago. He's just not good. Like, I don't know what Cincinnati is trying to do there, but they're not. It's not working. True freshman Avery Johnson for Kansas State, 5 rushing touchdowns against Texas Tech. Kansas State wins that game. They needed to get that game after losing to Oklahoma State the week before.
Yeah,
Kansas State, they're not as good as I thought they'd be, but they're not a bad team.
No, not at all. I agree.
Any other Big 12 thoughts? Oklahoma, Texas were off this week, so
that Houston West Virginia game, I had to go back and watch that. Fun game to watch.
It was awesome.
Fun game to watch.
I guess let's go to the Pac-12. We've already hit two of the big Pac-12 teams. Oregon State, they beat UCLA. Dante Moore, you can tell he's very talented, but on the road in some of these
Young,
environments,
very young.
we saw Utah kind of mess with him a little bit. He just first play of that game was a pick six. He bounced back and got better towards the end. But going on the road and facing these Beavers, our Beavers, man, that's tough. And look, Oregon State, they have a pretty favorable path. They get Washington and Oregon back to back to end the season, but they might be 9-1 going into those games. They're still just kind of lurking around and hanging out there. DJU had a pretty good game.
And here's the thing with DJU. I wanted to dig into that a little bit. Maybe we had the expectations too high. We understood who he was coming out of high school. We understand what it was at Clemson. It just wasn't a good fit for him. I really believe that. But even this year, I guess I had a little bit too high of expectations, but he looks comfortable. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think we've ever been able to say that in his career. He looks comfortable in that Oregon State offense. He's not putting up 400 yards a game or 4 touchdowns every game, but he looks comfortable. He's doing what he needs to do, and Oregon State looks like a really good football team. And I just think his play has contributed a lot to that. And it's not because he's just putting up Heisman-level stats. I just think it's because he's playing comfortable and he's doing what he needs to do to win.
He has a complimentary running game. Their defense it's not elite. It's not like top 15 in the country, but it's a good defense. It gets stops. And, like, Jonathan Smith is a very good coach. He is not going to go out there and ask DJU to be Michael Penix or Bo Nix and go win us the game. Like, you need to play good to win the game, but it's not all on DJU. And I feel like maybe sometimes that's been the case in the past. I think, again, he's just comfortable. Like, that's a good spot for him. Look, we got to talk about what happened Friday night. Like, 29 that balloon's been popped. Like that,
God!
You can't lose to that Stanford team. I'm sorry.
No, there is no excuse. There is no excuse.
They lost to Sacramento State. USC was up on them 49-0 at halftime. And look, I get USC is competent offensively, but you cannot be down 49-0 in a game.
You can't give up 40-plus points to Stanford. That's all I'm gonna say.
and okay,
you can't do that.
I don't even think that's the worst part of it. Like, we know Colorado's defense stinks out loud. Like, it's not good. I got 2 points to make here. Colorado is bad defensively. Stanford's worse. Like, Stanford is way worse. Like, Stanford is like bottom 10 defense in the country. Yeah. You couldn't score. You put 29 on them. You can't put you stop scoring. And 2, he is an elite player and elite talent, is going to be a top 5 pick. He's been out for 3 weeks. Why is Travis Hunter playing 100-something plus snaps? You cannot do that to him in altitude one game after that's just too much. And he got toasted like that kid that Stanford kid, 13 catches for like 299. A lot of that was on Travis Hunter. And I don't even think
I think I saw a stat where Travis Hunter gave up like 150 yards in coverage.
Yeah. And it was I don't even blame him a lot of the time. Like, honestly, I think Deion's got to take some responsibility for that. Like, you can't do that.
Yeah. And you hinted at it within the first 3 games of the year. Colorado doesn't have a running game, and that really surprises me. Like, granted, I don't think their offensive line is very good, but I thought they had a couple guys at running backs, at least Dylan Edwards. I thought he was going to be very good at running back. But you can't have Shador leading your team in rush yards and expect to win a game. You just can't do it.
Offensive line's bad. They can't run the ball. I think a bowl game's out. Like, the thing is, after that 3-0 start, I thought they'd go to a bowl game, to be honest with you, just how they look. But the only winnable games I see from the rest of the way is possibly Arizona and Washington State. But we're going to get to Arizona in 2 seconds. That's not a bad football team. Like, that's
we got to talk about that too.
I guess let's just go right into it. I mean, Arizona absolutely.
They put on a clinic.
Let me repeat. I told you pre-show. Yeah. Look at Arizona's 3 losses early in the season on the road in Starkville and overtime to Mississippi State. I get Mississippi State is one of the lesser SEC teams. Playing in Starkville is hard, especially Arizona's good, but they're not they're a top 50-40 team. Like, playing in Starkville is hard. They lost in triple overtime to USC. They should have won that game. Yes. They lost by 1 touchdown to Washington, who is arguably
top 5 team in the country,
At
probably top 3.
minimum,
Yeah,
top 5 or top 3 team in the country. That's like
that's not bad.
it wasn't a fluke either. Like they outgained Washington State like 500 something to 200 something. Like they
Yeah.
smothered them. Like shout out Jed Fish, man. Like he's doing a good job at Arizona, and
Yeah. And
they're going
Arizona's quarterback, how do you pronounce his last name?
That's a good question. I
I
know.
I don't know how to pronounce it. Either way, he only had 9 incompletions on the game. He threw for 342 yards. He didn't need to throw any touchdowns at all. They had 5 rushing touchdowns on the ground.
If he starts the season
not
for them,
bad.
they beat Mississippi State.
Yeah, Arizona is not a bad football team.
Not at all. Like just good job, Jed Fish. SEC. All right. What happened? I know y'all won, but like, man, like KJ Jefferson and those guys, they kind of had some chances to win that game at the end of it. Like, I'll let you take because that's the one game I know you watched.
Yeah. So the deal with Alabama, it's this team is going to go as far as Tommy Rees lets Jalen Milroe take them. I think a lot of that in the second half. I think that comes down to play calling. And I've been saying it for a couple of weeks now. When are we going to start using QB runs with Jalen Milroe? When are we going to do it? I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Jace McClellan, he's not bad. I think he's kind of proven himself at this point. But the offensive line is steadily improving. But either way, you have probably, I think, one of the better, if not the best, running quarterbacks in the country. You have to start treating him as such and using his legs in the offense. I think right now we're just banking on explosive plays through the air, which don't get me wrong, Jermaine Burton has been on a tear this year. Like you said, I don't know what's gotten into him, but he looks really good. Kobe Prentice had a long touchdown. Isaiah Bond, I think he leads the team in catches right now. And then we have Amari Niblack at tight end. He had a big touchdown catch. And then this defense. I love this defense. I love everything about it. If you go back and watch their games, a lot of the reason that this defense has put up or has given up the points they have is just because the offense has gone three and out, and the other team has had good field position. With that being said, I'm not worried about this Bama team. I'm not. I think we can still win. I think we can win the SEC, and I think we can still make a playoff. It just reminds me a lot of a Jalen Hurts style Alabama team, because a lot of people don't remember this. We had to win I think in like the last 2 minutes, actually the last minute of the game against Mississippi State in Jalen Hurts' second year. A lot of people don't remember that. Devontae Smith had to have a game-winning touchdown. And I remember walking away from a bunch of those Jalen Hurts led teams and just thinking, man, offense struggles to move the ball. Good thing we have a good defense. And we still made it to back-to-back championships like that. So it's really reminiscent of that. I still think Alabama can win the SEC. If this offensive line can steadily improve, and if Tommy Rees can start calling plays to benefit Jalen Milroe a little bit better, I think this Bama team is still going to be really good in the end.
So a lot of the noon games this past Saturday were kind of I viewed them as snoozers. Alabama goes up pretty quick, and I'm like, all right, I can probably tune this out. And then that was when Vanderbilt kind of jumped out on Georgia there at the beginning. We'll get to that in just a second. And then all of a sudden, like Bama just quit hitting big plays. Jalen Milroe couldn't complete a pass. The offensive line just is it's just not very good. Like Arkansas, let's not act like they're elite defensive line wise. Like the Bama offensive line is still the biggest worry to me, and it could cost them.
Yeah.
We'll see. I'm kind of interested to see how they play against Tennessee. Like I know, we'll get to them in a minute, but Tennessee's offense, especially in the passing game, has been kind of sketch all year. But Tennessee's defense, especially on the front seven, has been pretty good. So we'll see how that matchup unfolds. But man, they're probably not making a playoff. They've been left for dead. LSU is playing some exceptional football on the offensive side right now. Like they are.
Yeah.
That Auburn team that hung with Georgia and almost beat them, LSU just demoralized them Saturday. Like they didn't have a chance. They're going to beat Army this Saturday. They're going to be 6-2 heading into Tuscaloosa here in a few weeks. So I just want to make the point, like Jaden Daniels is absolutely playing out of his mind right now.
Nobody predicted that Jaden Daniels was going to perform like this.
He's another Heisman candidate. Again, I think the 2 losses are going to hurt him, like just being a 2-loss team. take him off that team, like he wins a most valuable player argument in a lot of cases. Maybe not more so than Michael Penix or Caleb Williams, but man, he means so much to that team.
Put Jaden Daniels on this Ohio State team right now. Ohio State is far and away the best team in the country.
Probably. Probably. Sorry, Concord. What? I don't know. Is this just another? Are we just writing this off as another Georgia sleepwalking thing? Like, I never really thought they were going to lose the game, but dude, 20 points to Vanderbilt.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's so up and down with them. I mean, you saw what they did against Kentucky. Like, you saw what they did against Kentucky. Fine, they blew them out, as they should. They should be doing that to every team on their schedule. Their regular season schedule, there should be no team that should even compete with them. I think they're going to sleepwalk through every other game this year outside of maybe Ole Miss and Missouri just because there's a little bit of hype behind it. If there's no hype behind their games, they sleepwalk. If there's hype behind it, they show up and beat every team by 50. It just doesn't make sense to me. But now Brock Bowers is out of the equation for a couple weeks. I'm very interested to see how this offense functions without him. I wonder if somebody steps up, and if they don't, I think there might be a loss or two coming for this team.
Yeah, and I will never call an injury a silver lining because especially how Brock Bowers is one of the top players in the country. This is going to force Georgia to get other players involved and build an offense without Brock Bowers.
Yes.
If you can figure that out and have success doing it, then you get to reinsert Brock Bowers. It can make you a more complete offense.
Yeah,
I'll at least say that. It's going to force Georgia, it's going to be on Mike Bobo to figure out, hey, I can't just throw the ball to 19 all the time because that works against most teams. They'll still be fine, I think, because again, the reality is Missouri is ranked right now, Tennessee's ranked, Ole Miss is ranked, Florida's 5-2. They're all going to be probably at least 17-point dogs to Georgia. That Georgia's going to be big favorites the rest of the way.
That being said, what do we make of the Florida Gators right now?
They're a perfectly fine football team. South Carolina blew that game, I think, and I hate taking away anything from Florida because South Carolina blew that game. They absolutely blew that game. They're playing just good when they are playing their style of football, and we've said this, when they're running the ball well, when they're getting defensive stops, they had to get out of their comfort zone a little bit. Graham Mertz had to make some plays, and he certainly did Saturday. So shout out to him. But generally, they're going to play within a confined area, and they still got a lot of tough games ahead. They got Georgia, they got LSU, they got Missouri, they got Florida State.
I mean, they could easily lose 4 games the rest of the way.
That's the thing. And again, this is about where me and you thought they'd be. We thought they'd win maybe 6-7 games at most. We didn't think they were going to be great, but I think people were they really wanted to shove the knife in Florida because not a lot of people like Florida. I don't know if many people know that, but Florida's not a well-liked team. So yeah, it's a good win for them. Billy Napier needed that.
Yeah,
they're 5-2. If you'd have told any Florida fan that at the beginning of the year, I think they'd have been fine with it. Honestly, you have Graham Mertz as your quarterback. He's not turning the ball over. He's playing perfectly fine. Tennessee A&M, I don't really got.
With Tennessee, they're kind of one of those teams. What you see is what you get.
The thing is, I don't know if it's a better record. I think Kevin Sumlin does have a better record, though, at the same point in his career as Jimbo did at A&M. Y'all fired A&M.
I don't think Kevin Sumlin had near as much talent as Jimbo has.
I know. He, outside of that, and he recruited well. This is the guy that did have Mike Evans, Myles Garrett, some of those guys. They had talent, but, I mean, Jimbo Fisher had what was the highest rated recruiting class of all time, and they're 4-3. I think that Band-Aid's getting ripped off at some point.
That buyout's looking a little sweeter each week.
And it's not gonna go down significantly ever. It's just at some point, call a spade. Just, Jimbo Fisher is not a high caliber. He's not going to win you a national title. It's just he's not. And I wasn't even Tennessee in this game.
And see, with the roster that A&M has, there is a lot of with the roster that A&M has, there's a lot of coaches that could be doing a lot better than Jimbo right now.
Yeah, and
that's a great coaching spot.
If and when that job comes open, there's going to be coaches killing for that job just because of the roster. If you can keep they have a top 5 class, if I'm not mistaken, coming in this year. Wegman comes back next year from injury. I don't know. I hate watching them play football. It's terrible.
Yeah.
And I hate taking away from Tennessee. Tennessee's defense is actually pretty good. Like I think that's.
Their front seven, their DBs still sketch me out.
I don't think they're as bad as they were last year. Their pass defense was like
yeah.
really bad last year. Like we saw in the
Yeah.
South Carolina game and some other stuff. Like their pass game was terrible. It's not elite, but it's a lot better than it was. They know how they have to win games. They cannot air it out like the Hendon Hooker, Jalen Hyatt team last year. Like you're gonna have to take it as it goes with Jalen or Joe Milton, and you know he had some bad mistakes Saturday, but they keep winning, and now you get you get an ultimate test in Tuscaloosa, which I know you're excited about, given how last year's events unfolded.
Yes.
All right, that'll I guess wrap up as far as conference goes. All right, you know it's at that point in the season we named our top four. All right, we debated on this. All right, just give me your four best teams in the country right now, regardless of record, regardless of what. Just give me the teams you like the best right now.
Right now, I'm gonna have to say Michigan, no particular order. Michigan, Ohio State, Washington, Oregon.
Oregon, okay, keeping Oregon in there. I'm pretty similar. Like I would have Washington. I've had Washington up at the top for a few weeks now, and I mean that obviously that win just kind of emboldens me to get with it. Michigan, I would probably have number two. Like I think on paper they're probably the best team in the Big Ten right now, and I picked Penn State at the beginning of the year. I still think Penn State's a very good football team, but Michigan's playing like really well. I actually have Penn State number three. Believe it or not, like I really do think
I'm not mad about that at all.
Defensively, like they're first in like everything. And look, I get they haven't played any elite offenses, but they're like nobody's doing anything to Penn State. They're like high in pressure rate. Their secondary's making plays. They're just a menace. They've got to find a deep downfield passing attack. Like he hasn't turned the ball over or anything, but like it's because he doesn't throw the ball deep. And I don't know if that's just
but also has he had to up to this point.
When you're playing UMass and Illinois and some of these teams, like all right, just our defense is going to kill them. Like it's fine. Man, I really go back and because like my gut says it's like Ohio State, but it's like dang, dude, does the Big Ten really have three teams? I'm gonna go against my gut and say Georgia right now, still at number four. I still feel like I would take them on a neutral field against every team but those top three right now, and that's kind of what this is right now. I would probably pick Georgia to beat Ohio State tomorrow if push came to shove because. Kyle McCord, I'm just not there yet. So
once Georgia proves to me that they can play efficiently and put up a lot of points without Brock Bowers, which arguably Brock Bowers is the best player in the country right now. Once they can prove to me that they can win efficiently and put up big numbers without him, then I would feel very comfortable putting Georgia back in the top three, probably top two. But until they prove that, I don't know if I have them in my top four right now.
Washington, Michigan, Penn State, Georgia. They're like if I had to do like the top four if the playoff ended if the playoff was today, I don't even know if I'd have Michigan in there, to be honest with you, just because I hadn't played anybody. Like it would probably look something like Washington, Oklahoma, Georgia, and
Florida State.
Probably Florida State or Ohio State, there's a lot of football to be played. There's so much football to be played. We're going to have Penn State, Ohio State Saturday. Alabama, Tennessee. Both those teams still have one losses and can still have big seasons, but one of them is going down Saturday. We'll see if Riley Leonard can suit up for Duke and see what they can do in Tallahassee against Florida State. You got Clemson, Miami. It's kind of like doesn't have playoff implications necessarily, but it'll be an entertaining game nonetheless.
USC might be on upset alert again against Utah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what it would do with USC right now.
The thing is, if they can win that game, they'll beat Cal. They'll be 8-1 heading into November. I mean, we'll see. We'll see with them. Any other thoughts before we get out of here? It's hard to believe we're this far in the season, and again, 2 weeks till playoff rankings come out.
Yep. I mean, we were sitting there. It feels like yesterday we were just counting down the days until college football was starting up, and then now look at us. We're 6-7 games into the year. It's flying by, and I love it. And we're about to have another big weekend this weekend. I think we're going to learn a lot about a bunch of teams this weekend. I think we're going to see if Florida State's can keep up their momentum. Utah. I wonder what they're going to do with USC. We already talked about that. Oregon, I like that matchup against Washington State. I like Oregon to win it, but Washington State might be out for blood. They might be in wounded dog mode because of how they just lost this past week. And then, of course, Alabama and Tennessee. We got a little bit of a sore spot right now, so I hope I am on the opposite end of what happened last year.
That's the thing. I remember you were the wounded dog after that game.
I was sick,
year.
man. Oh, so sick.
So you're out for blood this year, but it's gonna be fun. And then you didn't even mention the biggest game of all. We're really gonna whoever comes out of that game Saturday will have a possible. They're gonna be high in the playoffs because man, whoever wins the Ohio State Penn State game, they could afford a loss to Michigan and possibly still get in the playoff. That's the crazy thing.
Oh, Ohio State, Penn State? I was thinking Air Force and Navy.
Well, Air Force, I'm telling you, Air Force is going to probably be in the New Year's Six game. Just people need to realize that right now. That's a very good football team. Like you look at power ratings and advanced stats, they're top 30. Like that's not a bad football team at all. They're not a playoff contender, but I was making the joke to you earlier, and I'll get us out of here on this. Like Texas, Texas, Oklahoma play for a playoff spot. Texas beats Oklahoma. Oklahoma's going to have to get up off the mat, go to the Cotton Bowl, and play the triple option and against the Air Force. And I don't know if that's going to be very fun. So somebody's going to have their feelings hurt after not getting in the playoff, and they're going to have to deal with Troy Calhoun and his Air Force team. So,
and just to end on that, I saw a 12-team prediction playoff from somebody, and Air Force was in it. For some reason, it just didn't feel right to me. It just looks so
but they're gonna group of 5 gets a team in next year, so they're the best group of 5 team right now. Them or Tulane is the best group of 5 team right now.
Oh, give me Air Force. Give me Air Force.
Air Force. Good. But all right, that's gonna do it for the Goal Line Stand. We will catch y'all next week after week 8. We'll recap all the games we just mentioned. Appreciate anybody tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell to let you know when our content is up. So, give us a review on wherever you listen to the podcast, 1 star, 3 star, 5 stars. It don't matter. We just need to hear your opinion on what we're doing. We appreciate it, but that'll do it for us. This is Jackson Caldwell. That's Coby Reed. Goal Line Stand is out.